Queen Rilza sat alone in her throne room, staring out at the vast, dimly lit city of Traska. The palace, built from stone and thick crystal, felt cold and empty. She had been the ruler of the Rescari people for many cycles now, but in her heart, she knew she was nothing more than an outsider among her own people. Her skin, a dull brown gray, was unlike the iridescent hues that shimmered on the bodies of most Rescari. Her limbs were uneven, one arm longer than the other, and her face was marked by scars from an old battle. The Rescari believed in perfection. Beauty was power, and symmetry was sacred. A ruler was expected to be a shining example of the ideal Rescari form, someone whose appearance inspired awe and respect. But Rilza was nothing like that. She had always known she was different. From the moment she was born, her people had whispered behind her back. The elders had debated whether she was fit to rule. And while she had proven herself capable, her physical flaws had remained a constant reminder of her difference. The other nobles tolerated her, but none of them loved her. They feared her power, but they could not see past her ugly exterior. Rilza's mother, Queen Tarza, had been a vision of perfection. She had been tall, with a graceful form and shining silver skin. When she ruled, her people adored her, and her beauty matched her strength. Rilza's mother had once told her that she would carry on the legacy, but Rilza knew that it was impossible. No one could love the ugly queen that Traska had been forced to accept. The court had been growing restless in recent years. Whispers of rebellion were growing louder. Some of the younger nobles had begun to question the queen's ability to lead, and many of them saw her appearance as a sign of weakness. They wanted a ruler who could inspire pride, not one who reminded them of their own imperfections. Rilza's heart ached with every passing day. She could feel the weight of their judgment, and it made her bones ache. But she had a duty to her people. She had sworn to protect them, no matter what. Her father had died early, leaving her with the responsibility of ruling. Even if no one cared for her, she had to do what was best for the planet. She had been trained for this role her entire life. It wasn't easy, but she had learned how to be a strong leader, even if no one saw her strength in the way she looked. As she sat on her throne, alone with her thoughts, a servant entered the room. The young Rescari bowed low, his antennae twitching nervously. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice trembling, "the human envoy has arrived." Rilza stood up slowly, her legs feeling stiff. "Send him in," she said with a voice that was firmer than she felt. The servant nodded and hurried away, leaving Rilza alone again for just a moment. She adjusted her posture, trying to straighten her crooked limbs. She looked at her reflection in the dark crystal of the throne. Her dull skin and uneven features stared back at her. For a moment, she wondered if the human envoy would see her as her people did, a ruler with no beauty, a queen without grace. But she could not afford to think that way. She had a role to play, and she would play it to the best of her ability. The doors to the throne room opened, and a man entered. A human. He was tall, with dark hair and eyes that seemed calm, almost distant. His appearance was simple, but there was something about his presence that made Rilza's heart beat a little faster. Could this human see her for who she was, or would he too only judge her for her flaws? The human stood at the doorway of the throne room, his figure framed by the dim light outside. Queen Rilza could see the tall man clearly now. His dark hair was cut short, and his eyes were steady, without the nervousness that often came with first encounters. He was dressed in simple clothing, a loose-fitting uniform with the symbols of the United Human Colonies. It was nothing like the shining armor or colorful robes of the Rescari, but something about his presence made Rilza pause. "Greetings, Queen Rilza," the human said, bowing his head slightly. His voice was calm, steady. "I am Da-Hyun, the envoy from the United Human Colonies." Rilza raised an eyebrow. She had heard of the human colonies before. They were far away, and their people had been busy with their own affairs. She had never met one of them in person. The humans were known to be strong and clever, but they had little interest in alien worlds like hers. Traska was not a priority for them. "Welcome, Dahyun," she said, her voice low but strong. "It is rare for humans to visit Traska. What brings you here?" Dahyun stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. Rilza found it strange that he did not seem to be disturbed by her appearance. Most others would have looked away by now, as if afraid to meet her gaze. Instead, he looked at her as if she were just another ruler, not someone to be feared or mocked. "I have come to learn more about your people and to establish peaceful relations," Dahyun explained, his voice still calm. "The United Human Colonies believe in understanding different cultures, and I am here to see how we can work together." Rilza nodded slowly. Peaceful relations. That was a goal many had spoken of, but few had truly cared about. Her people were proud and protective of their planet, and they didn't trust outsiders easily. Many had whispered that it was only a matter of time before they would be forced into a war with other species. But here was this human, offering peace. It was a strange thought. "I see," she said quietly. "What is it you wish to learn from us?" Dahyun's eyes softened, and he stepped closer. "I want to understand how your people live, how you govern, and how we can help each other," he said. "I have heard of your strength, your wisdom, and your rich history. I want to learn all of it." Rilza could not help but feel a little suspicious. What did this human truly want? Was he trying to trick her into lowering her defenses? But there was something in his gaze that made her pause. He wasn't like the others. There was no hidden agenda in his words, no arrogance or impatience. He was simply curious. "Then you will learn," she said, her voice more sure now. "I will show you the ways of the Rescari. But know this, we do not trust easily. You must prove that your intentions are honest." Dahyun nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I understand. I am here to listen, not to force anything. I want to understand your people, not change them." Rilza studied him carefully. There was no sign of deceit, no glint of ambition in his eyes. Maybe he was different. Maybe he truly was here for peace, not for power. But she knew better than to trust someone so quickly. She would watch him carefully. She would see if his actions matched his words. The two stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation hanging between them. The distant hum of the palace was the only sound, but Rilza's mind was already racing. There was something about this human, Dahyun, that made her feel uneasy. It wasn't fear, but something else. Could he really be the one to see her for who she was? Could he truly understand her world without judging her? Finally, Rilza broke the silence. "I will arrange for you to meet with my council tomorrow," she said. "But for today, you will rest. You must be tired from your journey." Dahyun smiled. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I would be honored to rest in your palace." Rilza nodded, but inside, she felt a strange pull. This human, Dahyun, was unlike anyone she had met before. And though she would not admit it, a part of her hoped that maybe, just maybe, he could see past her flaws. Maybe he could see her for who she truly was. The next few days passed quietly. Dahyun spent his time meeting with Rilza's council, learning about the Rescari way of life. Rilza watched him closely, not sure what to make of him. He was always calm, never quick to judge. He listened to everything, asked many questions, and took careful notes. Most of the time, he was polite and respectful, but there was something in his eyes that made Rilza wonder. He seemed genuinely interested, not just in the information, but in the people of her world. One day, there was an unexpected emergency. The power grid in the palace, an ancient and fragile system, suddenly failed. The entire complex went dark, and for a moment, the silence was overwhelming. The Rescari technicians scrambled to restore power, but it was clear that they were not prepared for the situation. The room filled with nervous whispers as the lights flickered, then went out completely. Rilza stood up quickly, her antennae twitching as she scanned the room. The technicians seemed unsure of what to do next, and the nobles murmured anxiously. The palace was vulnerable, and for a moment, Rilza felt a deep frustration. As queen, she was supposed to have control over everything. But in this moment, it felt as if everything was slipping from her grasp. That's when Da-hyun stepped forward. He had been sitting quietly on the edge of the room, observing the chaos. Without a word, he moved toward the control panels. The rescue technicians watched him curiously but said nothing. They were too proud to ask for help from a human. Da-hyun didn't seem to care. He examined the panels quickly, his hands moving with practiced precision. Rilza stood back, watching him work. She could hear the soft clicks of his tools, the hum of wires as he adjusted the system. It was clear that he knew exactly what he was doing. After a few minutes, the lights flickered back on. The palace was safe again. The technicians, surprised by how quickly it had been fixed, turned to Da-hyun with a mix of awe and confusion. "You fixed it so quickly," one of them said, her voice full of wonder. Da-hyun nodded. "It was just a minor fault in the system. It's easy to fix if you know what to look for." Rilza was stunned. She had never seen anyone solve a problem so quickly. The rescue were skilled engineers, but this human had done it faster and with more ease than any of them. She couldn't help but feel a strange sense of admiration. There was something about Da-hyun that set him apart from the others. He wasn't just a foreigner here. He was someone who understood things in a way that the rescue didn't. He had a mind that worked in a different way, and that made him valuable. As the technicians went back to their work, Rilza approached him. Her steps were cautious, but she couldn't hide her curiosity. "That was impressive," she said. "I didn't think anyone could fix it that quickly." Da-hyun smiled, though it wasn't a proud smile. "It's just what I do," he said simply. "I'm an engineer after all." Rilza tilted her head, her antennae twitching in thought. "I see," she said. "You are more than just a diplomat, then. You are skilled in many ways." Da-hyun nodded. "Yes, I've spent my life working with machines. I've always been fascinated by how things work, and I enjoy fixing what is broken." Rilza studied him for a moment, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. She felt respect. It wasn't just because he had fixed the power grid, though that was impressive. It was because he didn't act like most people. He didn't try to hide his skills or make himself seem more important than he was. He simply did what needed to be done, without expecting praise. It was a strange feeling for Rilza. For most of her life, she had been judged for her appearance, for her differences. But here was this human, Da-hyun, who didn't care about how she looked. He didn't even seem to notice the imperfections that so many others saw as flaws. In his eyes, she was just another person, just another ruler trying to do her best. It made her wonder, could it be possible that he saw her differently? That he saw beyond her physical appearance and recognized the strength inside her? She didn't know yet, but she was beginning to think that Da-hyun might be someone she could trust. As they stood there in the quiet of the palace, Rilza found herself feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was there. Maybe, just maybe, this human could change her world. As the days went on, Da-hyun's presence in the palace grew more and more noticeable. His calm nature and willingness to help had won the trust of many, and even those who were initially skeptical began to warm up to him. Queen Rilza watched this carefully, though she tried not to show how much it affected her. The court had always been filled with whispers and doubts about her leadership, but Da-hyun's actions had a way of cutting through the noise. He wasn't like the other visitors she had had over the years. Most diplomats or guests would speak of peace and unity, but there was something different about Da-hyun. His words were simple, but his actions spoke louder. The way he interacted with the palace servants, with the nobles, and even with the common people who came to the palace, he treated everyone with the same respect. He didn't care if they were important or not. He cared about the people themselves. One afternoon, as Rilza walked through the palace gardens, she noticed Da-hyun standing near a small group of workers who were repairing an old fountain. They were having trouble with a pipe, and no one seemed to know how to fix it. Rilza was about to walk away, but then she saw Da-hyun kneel beside the workers. Without saying a word, he began to inspect the pipe, gently moving aside the workers' tools. Within minutes, he had figured out the problem and began to guide the workers on how to fix it. Rilza stopped in her tracks, watching in silence. The workers looked at Da-hyun with awe and gratitude, not because he was a human, but because he had solved a problem they had been struggling with for hours. It was the same as with the power grid. He didn't boast about his skills. He just helped, quietly, without expecting anything in return. Rilza felt a strange feeling in her chest. It was as if she had been watching the world shift slightly, just enough for her to see something new. Da-hyun wasn't just fixing machines or pipes. He was fixing something deeper. The way he moved through the palace, the way he treated everyone. There was a quiet kindness in him that had begun to spread. The servants began to smile more often when he walked by, and the nobles, once cold and distant, began to engage in conversations with him. Even the children of Traska would wave at him as he passed by. But it wasn't just the people around him who were changing. Rilza herself felt different. As she watched Da-hyun interact with everyone, she realized something important. She had spent so many years hiding her true self, afraid of her own flaws, afraid of being seen as weak. But here was a human, someone who didn't care about appearances, someone who saw her as more than her scars and imperfections. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a deep orange, Rilza found herself walking toward Da-hyun in the courtyard. He was sitting alone, staring up at the stars as if lost in thought. It was rare for him to be so quiet, and it intrigued her. She had grown used to his calm, steady presence, but now there was something different. He seemed distant. Da-hyun, she said softly, approaching him. He looked up, surprised but not uncomfortable. Your Majesty, he greeted her with a respectful nod. Is something wrong? Rilza hesitated for a moment. She wasn't sure what she wanted to say, but she knew she needed to ask something. Why do you stay here? She asked. You could be anywhere, in any other palace, surrounded by other people. Why stay with us, with me? Da-hyun's expression softened, and for a moment, Rilza saw a glimpse of the man behind the diplomat. He wasn't just someone doing his job. He was a person, someone with his own reasons for being here. I stay because I believe that every place, every person, has something worth learning from, he said slowly. And I see something worth learning here, in Traska and in you. Rilza blinked, not sure how to respond. In me? Yes, Da-hyun said with a gentle smile. You may not see it, but I do. You are more than the queen they think they know. You are strong in ways they cannot understand. That is why I am here. Rilza felt her heart skip a beat. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that. Most people saw her as a ruler, a figurehead, a symbol. But Da-hyun saw her as a person. He saw the strength she had hidden for so long. For the first time in years, Rilza felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just the feeling of being respected. It was the feeling of being understood. And that was something she had never expected to find from a human. The days passed quickly after that conversation between Rilza and Da-hyun. There was a quiet change in the air, a subtle shift that Rilza couldn't ignore. She found herself thinking more and more about the human envoy, Da-hyun, and the way he had seen her differently. It wasn't just that he respected her as queen. It was that he respected her as a person, flaws and all. He saw her strength, even when she couldn't see it herself. Their meetings became more frequent. They would spend time together in the gardens, walking through the quiet paths, or sitting on the balcony overlooking the palace. Da-hyun would ask her about the history of the Rescari, about their traditions and their values. And Rilza, for the first time in a long while, found herself eager to share. There was something about him that made her feel comfortable, as if she could let down her guard, even if just for a little while. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the palace, Rilza and Da-hyun found themselves sitting together on the balcony, gazing at the stars. It had become a routine for them, and Rilza cherished these quiet moments. The stars had always been a source of comfort for her, a reminder that no matter how alone she felt, the universe was vast, and there was always something more to discover. "I've been thinking," Dahyun said, breaking the silence. "I want to help you, not just as an envoy, but as someone who wants to see your people thrive. The Rescari have so much potential, and I think we could work together to make things better for everyone." Rilza turned her head to look at him. His expression was serious, but there was a warmth in his eyes that made her heart flutter. He wasn't just speaking out of duty or obligation. He truly believed in what he was saying. "You want to help?" she asked, her voice soft. "But you're human. You're not like us. You don't understand the way we do things." Dahyun smiled gently. "I may not understand everything about your culture, but I'm willing to learn. And sometimes, an outside perspective can be the thing that helps the most. You don't have to do everything alone, Rilza." Rilza felt a tightness in her chest. She had always carried the weight of her people's expectations, the fear of failing them. She had always thought she had to do everything herself, that no one would ever see her as capable or worthy. But now, with Dahyun's words, she began to wonder. Could she let someone else help her? Could she trust him with her burdens? For a long moment, she said nothing. She simply looked at the stars, letting the silence settle between them. The idea of working together, of sharing the responsibility, felt strange, but freeing. "I've always been alone," she finally said, her voice quiet. "Alone in my thoughts, alone in my decisions. It's hard to trust anyone, especially when they've always seen me as different." Dahyun nodded, understanding. "I know how that feels. Back home, I've been an outsider too, in many ways. But sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is let others in. We don't have to carry everything alone." Rilza turned to him, her heart heavy with emotions she couldn't fully understand. "You really believe that?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I do," Dahyun said, his eyes meeting hers with sincerity. "You are not alone, Rilza. Not anymore." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Rilza felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. She had always feared being alone, but in that moment, she didn't feel alone at all. With Dahyun by her side, she could see a future where she wasn't just a ruler trapped by her flaws. She could see a future where she was strong, where she worked with others to make a better world. The weight on her shoulders, the heavy burden she had carried for so long, seemed just a little lighter. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. A new chapter for Traska. And for her. As the stars continued to twinkle above them, Rilza found herself smiling softly. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she was no longer afraid to face it. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, discussions, and planning. Rilza found herself working alongside Dahyun more and more, discussing ideas for improving the Rescari's technology, economy, and culture. His ideas were simple but effective, and they challenged the old ways of thinking that had held her people back for so long. At first, many of Rilza's advisors were hesitant, unsure about taking advice from a human, but Dahyun's calm approach and his ability to solve problems won them over one by one. It wasn't just his knowledge that impressed them. It was the way he respected their traditions while suggesting new ways of doing things. The Rescari were a proud people, and they didn't take kindly to outsiders telling them how to live. But Dahyun never forced his ideas on them. He presented his thoughts carefully, always taking into account their values and customs. Over time, the resistance faded, and there was a growing sense of hope among the people. Maybe, just maybe, they could improve their world without losing what made them unique. One morning, as Rilza was walking through the palace halls, she passed by a group of children playing in the courtyard. They were laughing and running around, their voices bright and full of energy. It was a sight that warmed her heart, and for a moment, she forgot about her duties. But then, one of the children ran up to her, her small hands holding a flower. "Queen Rilza," the child called out, her eyes wide with excitement. "Look, I picked this for you." Rilza smiled softly and knelt down to the child's level. "Thank you," she said, accepting the flower. It was a small, delicate thing with soft purple petals. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind Rilza that there was still beauty in the world, even amidst the challenges her people faced. As she stood up, she noticed Dahen standing nearby, watching the scene with a quiet smile. He had been spending more time with the people of Traska, learning their ways and getting to know them better. The children had taken a liking to him, often running up to him to ask questions or show him their toys. Rilza walked over to him, holding the flower in her hand. "The children seem to like you," she said, her voice warm. Dahyun smiled. "They remind me of my younger sister," he said softly. "They have a way of seeing the world that I think we sometimes forget as adults." Rilza nodded, feeling the truth in his words. As a queen, she had been so focused on the responsibilities of leadership that she had forgotten what it was like to be carefree, to see the world with wonder. The weight of her crown had made her forget the small, simple joys of life. "I used to play like that," she said, her voice distant, "before everything became so complicated." Dahyun turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "It's easy to lose that part of yourself when you're focused on keeping everything in order. But it's important to remember who you were, not just who you are now. You're still that person inside." Rilza felt a lump in her throat. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Most people saw her as the queen, the ruler, the one who had to make the hard choices. But Dahyun didn't see her that way. He saw her as someone more than her title, someone who had dreams and feelings, just like everyone else. "Thank you," she said quietly, the words carrying more weight than she had intended. Dahyun gave a small nod. "I'm glad you're starting to believe that, Rilza. You're more than just a queen. You're a person, and you don't have to carry everything alone." His words echoed in her mind long after their conversation ended. It was as if he had unlocked something deep inside her, something she had buried for a long time. She had always thought she had to be strong for her people, that she couldn't show weakness or doubt. But maybe, just maybe, she could start to let go of some of that pressure. Maybe she didn't have to be perfect. That night, as Rilza lay in her bed, she couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with thoughts of the future, of the changes that were slowly taking shape on her planet. She had always feared that change would mean losing everything she had known. But now, with Dahyun by her side, she wasn't so sure. Maybe change wasn't something to fear. Maybe it was something to embrace. As the moonlight filtered through her window, Rilza closed her eyes, letting the quiet peace of the night wash over her. For the first time, in a long time, she felt hopeful. The changes in Traska were starting to show. The palace, once filled with tension, now had a sense of calm. Dahyun's presence had made a real difference, not just in the way people worked, but in the way they thought. His ideas, his respect for the Reskari traditions, and his gentle ways had started to heal old wounds. Even those who had been most skeptical of him were now beginning to see him as a friend. But not everyone was happy with the changes. There were still a few powerful members of the court who did not like the influence the human had over their queen. They had always believed in the old ways, the ways that kept them in power. They saw Dahyun's ideas as a threat, something that would weaken their control over Traska. One day, as Rilza walked through the palace gardens with Dahyun, she could sense the unease in the air. It was subtle at first, just a glance here and there, a quiet whisper that quickly disappeared when someone saw her. But it was enough to make her nervous. "Is something wrong?" Dahyun asked, noticing her change in mood. Rilza hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I think there are those who don't like what we're doing here. They don't like the changes." Dahyun nodded, his expression serious. "Change is always hard, especially when it challenges old traditions. But you're doing the right thing, Rilza. Your people need it." "I know," she said softly, "but sometimes I wonder if they'll ever accept it." Just then, a figure appeared in the distance. It was one of the palace guards, a tall, strong man named Seok. He was loyal to Rilza, but he had always been one of the more traditional members of the court. Rilza had known him since she was a child, and she trusted him. At least she had. As Seok walked closer, Rilza noticed the stern look on his face. His eyes were fixed on Dahyun, and there was a coldness in them that made Rilza's heart race. "Your Majesty," Seok said with a bow, his voice formal but stiff. "There are some who wish to speak with you. They say they have concerns about the changes in the palace. They do not agree with your decisions." Rilza's stomach tightened. She had known this day might come, but hearing it out loud still shocked her. She looked over at Dahyun, who stood quietly by her side, his face calm but alert. "I'll be there shortly," Rilza said, her voice firm. She knew she had to face this, but a part of her wanted to avoid it. She had worked so hard to build trust and understanding, and now it felt like it was all at risk. As the guard left, Rilza turned to Dahyun. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "This is part of what I feared. There are many who think I've strayed too far from the traditions of our people." Dahyun placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. "You can't please everyone, Rilza, but you've already done more for your people than anyone else has. You're not alone in this. I'm here, and I believe in you." Rilza looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had come to rely on him more than she had ever expected. His words gave her strength, even when she felt uncertain. Together, they walked to the council room. The air was thick with tension as Rilza entered, followed by Dahyun. The nobles were gathered, their faces serious. Some of them were older, their eyes hard with years of holding power. Others were younger, still learning the ways of the court. One of the older nobles, a man named Quan, stepped forward. His voice was loud and commanding. "Your Majesty, we cannot continue down this path. These human ideas, these changes will weaken Traska. We have lived by tradition for centuries. Why should we change now?" Rilza took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She had to stand her ground. "We must change, Quan, for the future of Traska. Our people deserve better than the way things have always been. They deserve a chance to grow and thrive, not be trapped by the past." The room was silent for a long moment. Then, another voice spoke up. It was Seok, and his words cut through the silence like a knife. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice low. "You speak of change, but what will happen to the people who disagree with you? How will we protect Traska from those who wish to see it fall?" Rilza felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't just about change anymore. It was about loyalty. And she wasn't sure how much longer she could count on the loyalty of those around her. Would they stand with her, or would they stand with the old ways? Dahyun stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "Change isn't easy," he said calmly, "but it's necessary. And if you're truly loyal to Traska, you'll see that. You'll see that this is the only way forward." Rilza looked at him, her heart heavy. This was the moment. The test of loyalty had begun. The council room was tense. Rilza stood in the center, surrounded by the nobles and advisors who had always been her pillars of support. But now it felt different. The weight of their eyes, the uncertainty in their voices, it was clear that something had changed. There was a deep divide, and it was growing wider with each passing minute. Seok's words echoed in her mind. How would they protect Traska from those who disagreed? The question was simple, but its answer was far from easy. Rilza knew that the decisions she made today would shape the future of her people, and there was no going back. The path of change wasn't just about progress. It was about challenging everything that had been built before her. Dahyun stood quietly beside her, his steady presence a reminder that she wasn't alone. He had always believed in her, even when she struggled to believe in herself. But now, as the council stared at her, she couldn't help but feel the weight of their expectations. Could she lead them into a new era, or would the past hold them back forever? I understand your concerns, Rilza said, her voice calm but firm. But I will not allow fear of the unknown to keep us from growing. Traska needs to change. We cannot continue living in the shadow of old traditions that no longer serve us. Quan, one of the most powerful nobles in the room, scowled. You speak of change, but do you understand what you're risking? We have built everything we know on these traditions. They are the foundation of our strength. To abandon them is to abandon our very identity. Rilza felt a pang in her chest. She had heard these arguments before, but this time, they felt different. This time, the words carried the weight of history, but Dahyun's words from earlier returned to her. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary. She had to make a choice. She couldn't allow fear to stop her from doing what was right. I do understand the risks, Rilza replied, her eyes meeting Quan's. But I also understand that if we stay where we are, we will fall behind. The world is changing around us, and if we don't change too, we will be left in the past. Is that what you want for Traska? To be left behind? The room was silent for a moment. Then, Jung Seok spoke again, his voice heavy with doubt. What about the people who don't want these changes? What about the ones who are loyal to the old ways? Will we ignore them? Rilza looked at Jung Seok, her heart aching. She had known him for years, and she had always trusted him. But now, his words felt like a wall between them. I'm not ignoring them, Jung Seok. I'm asking them to trust in a better future. A future where we can still honor our traditions, but also embrace new ideas. A future where we can be strong, not by holding on to the past, but by moving forward. The tension in the room was thick. Some of the nobles looked uncertain, while others exchanged quiet words with each other. It was clear that the decision was not easy for any of them. The old ways had been ingrained in their culture for centuries, and changing them was no small feat. But Rilza knew, deep down, that this was the only way forward. Finally, a voice broke the silence. It was one of the younger nobles, a woman named Hae-young. She stepped forward, her eyes filled with determination. I believe in you, Your Majesty, she said, her voice steady. I believe in the changes you're trying to make. If we stay in the past, we will never grow. We will always be stuck. I want to see Traska thrive. I want to see it become something more than what it is now. The room was still, but now there was a shift. The weight of Hae-young's words seemed to break through the tension. Slowly, other nobles began to speak up. Some agreed with Hae-young, while others remained quiet, unsure of what to say. But there was no denying the shift in the air. The seeds of change were being planted, and even those who had once been resistant were starting to open their eyes. Rilza turned to Dahyun, who stood by her side, watching the unfolding scene. He gave her a small smile, a quiet encouragement. She knew that he believed in her. And for the first time, she truly believed in herself. With a deep breath, Rilza looked around the room at her advisors. We will change, she said, her voice strong and clear. And together, we will make Traska a better place, a place where everyone can thrive, no matter their past. This is the future I choose, and I hope you will choose it with me. For a long moment, the room was silent. But then, slowly, one by one, the nobles began to nod. Some of them still looked unsure, but the path forward had been set. The future of Traska would be shaped by the choices they made now. And as Rilza looked around the room, she knew that she had made the right decision. The hard part was over. Now, the real work could begin. The choice had been made, and it was a choice for change.